Hi, everybody. I'm Sunny, and this is We Gotta Talk, a live weekly digital talk show and podcast where we like to dig deep. Real talk, big topics. Now, let's dig in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to We Gotta Talk. I'm so glad you're here today. Today's topic is something that I think we all hear a lot about anecdotally, especially on social media. You run into the word narcissist quite a bit. You see maybe friends tagging or calling the people in their lives narcissists, or talking about narcissistic behavior or how to deal with a narcissist. The word seems to be thrown around quite a bit, but I wanted to get some expert insight on the true definition of a narcissist. Can there really be that many of them out there? I feel like everybody on Instagram is sure that someone in their life requires this diagnosis, but we're going to find out today with our amazing guest. Dr. Jaime Zuckerman is a licensed clinical psychologist and a nationally recognized expert on narcissism. She's an author. She's a regular media figure, so you've probably heard her on some of your other favorite podcasts or your local TV news. She's a soon-to-be podcaster. Welcome to the world. And she also coaches those who live with or love a narcissist. So we are so happy to welcome Dr. Z onto We Gotta Talk. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Z.
Thank you for having me.
I think we should start at the top. I need your clinical, concise, and succinct definition of what is a narcissist.
Yes. So I like to kind of give it in terms of what it would look like to the average person, because I find that the clinical terminology sometimes can get a little confusing and gray. So basically, I always start with not everybody who is a jerk, who cheats, who is even abusive is a narcissist. So a narcissistic personality disorder is a pervasive personality style where the person is in every domain of their life, not just with their romantic relationships, not just with their siblings, not just at work, but all domains of their life. A sense of entitlement, grandiosity, total lack of accountability for their behaviors, meaning they may hurt you in the process of getting what they want, but that is not their fault. You were in the way and you are kind of a casualty. So, so lack of remorse, lack of accountability, extremely sensitive to even the slightest bit of criticism, even constructive criticism, extremely manipulative, there's a whole host of behaviors that fall under the manipulation category. We hear about love bombing. We hear about coercive control, financial abuse, and we can talk about all of those things. Extremely emotionally abusive, physically abusive, sometimes sexually abusive. And again, it's within all domains of their life. It's this kind of ingrained personality style and the way in which they see their world, the way in which they see themselves in relation to other people.
Is there any clear statistic that's reliable on how many narcissists there really are in the world?
Yeah. So if you look at the DSM, which is kind of the psychiatric manual of all the disorders, right? The number is extremely, extremely low. A tiny percentage of the population, tiny percentage. Here is the problem with that. The amount of people with narcissistic personality disorder, me personally, I feel this way, and I know my colleagues feel this way, is grossly underdiagnosed, and for a couple reasons. Number one, and that doesn't mean that everybody's a narcissist, right? But I always hear people say, why are you focusing so much on narcissistic personalities that are such a small percentage of the population? No, here's why. They do not present for treatment. They don't feel anything's wrong. So we really have no way, except kind of mostly secondhand, to categorize somebody as a narcissist. And that's the problem, because people say, well, unless you are seen by someone who's, a specialist and can clinically diagnose you. And yes, that's true. However, again, they really do not present for treatment. And most of the people that work in this realm treat the spouses of those with narcissistic personality disorder, the children of those with narcissistic personality disorder, the friends of them. So once in a while, I will have somebody come into my office. They'll bring their partner in, and the partner has narcissistic personality disorder. I mean, and for those that work and specialize in this field, you know what I'm talking about. And it's not because I'm so good at it. It has nothing to do with that. You know immediately with the way they start to either charm you, or, one of two things will happen. They'll either try to charm you and realize it's not going to happen, and they'll either get up and walk out, Or they'll tell their partner, I really don't like her. She has no idea what she's talking about. I want somebody else because I don't give them what they want, and I really set limits with them. So they just don't stay in treatment unless court mandated.
That's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story.
Well, that would make it, I would imagine, really difficult for the people in their lives who are entangled. And I feel like that's a theme that I'm hearing. And I've got several questions that will kind of push to the end that we got on social media. But what I'm hearing as I'm interacting with people who feel that they are in a relationship with a narcissist is the exhaustion from either trying to convince them to seek out that help or just dealing with the symptoms and how it impacts their lives. So is it smart to kind of focus the conversations then on, because the narcissist will rarely seek help, on healing the people who are in their orbit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. What I tell people is I really, really discourage people from going to couples therapy with a narcissist.
It's just because of why? It'll be frustrating and you won't get anywhere?
It's not only that. There's a couple reasons. One, and this is to no fault of any therapist whatsoever, but because it's a set of such nuanced behaviors that are very subtle at times, and they're so good at charming people that if the marriage therapist doesn't understand the nuances of narcissistic personality disorder, it can really get overlooked because they're so charming and they really try so hard to align with the therapist to put their best foot forward. So here you have this person who is abused, right? Going into a situation where they're not going to speak up. They're not going to contradict the person. They need to drive home with this person. And getting in a car with an angry narcissist is not a good idea. They have to put their head on the pillow next to this person. So it puts the abused partner in a very difficult situation because it re-traumatizes them. It invalidates their feelings. They already feel crazy. And now you have a therapist telling you, well, it looks like they're trying. And they tell them to go on date nights. And that's not what you want to do. So I really tell people just to seek out their own therapy with somebody who specializes in that. Otherwise, it doesn't just not work, but it also really invalidates them.
Does it ever go away? Like you're describing a situation of putting your head down on a pillow next to someone who is seemingly devoid of the ability to sort of support and love a partner in a way that really matters, whether that's their spouse or even their life. And it feels hopeless to me. And I don't want to put that message out there though, Dr. Z, that if you love a narcissist, it's hopeless. I mean, like, can it get better is the simple question.
No, not really.
Oh, God.
No, I know. So here's the thing. Here's what I would say. When somebody says, but I love them, but I love a narcissist, okay? What they love, and I'm putting a blanket statement. Again, this is narcissistic personality disorder, right? Not somebody that has narcissistic tendencies or features. We all have that at times. This is somebody who has a pervasive personality disorder. And so there's two things. One, the love that they have, I want to talk about that a little bit. Most of the time, when somebody says, but I love them, they're usually in some sort of trauma bonding situation. Their chemicals in their brain are very similar to those stuck in an addiction. It's an addiction model. So I know they may feel that they really love this person, but their brain, their sense of self, the gaslighting, the manipulation has taken such a neurological toll on them, forget emotional, that it's really difficult to see what actually is going on. And so oftentimes what you'll hear is they keep trying to get back to that person that they loved in the beginning of the relationship. The problem is the person in the beginning of the relationship, that was fake. That person didn't ever exist. They used that to try to get you, to suck you in. That's not who they are. And so you're trying to love somebody who never existed in the first place, which is really traumatic to actually take that in. And you're really fighting an uphill battle. And in order to stay with somebody in a narcissistic abusive relationship, you will need to really give up your sense of self. I mean, it's really a no-win situation. And so I tell people it's okay to feel how you feel. But staying in an abusive relationship because you love the narcissist is exactly what I work on with them.
It feels terminal, if I'm being honest. Hearing you talk about that, I mean, I understand why it would be a really, really big thing for someone's partner or someone they love to be diagnosed with NPD, because this feels terminal.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, are there people that have, if you kind of look at it on a continuum, are there people that have a little bit more of a willingness? Because it's not so much an awareness, it's a willingness to want to change. It's a willingness to be vulnerable. Narcissists do not want to be vulnerable. So you have to be willing to be vulnerable. And can people with narcissistic personality disorder make small changes? Sure. Are they meaningful changes? Not so much. Are they long-standing and able to be maintained when that narcissist is challenged in the future? Probably not.
So that was my follow-up is, have you ever seen what we would call like a success story, a couple, and let's just hyper focus on a couple relationship for now, or even let me put it this way. Let's focus on the type of nuclear relationship of either a spouse or a parent or immediate family member. Have you ever seen either of those types of relationships where one party involved had NPD and the relationship was actually getting better? We'll put air quotes.
No.
My God, Dr.
And I've been doing this a really long time. Well, when it gets better, though, let me rephrase it. When you say gets better, do you mean does the narcissist get better? No. Does the person in the dynamic learn strategies on how to deal with the manipulation, how to set boundaries so they themselves feel more at peace, more at ease, and they feel like they're operating better in life? Absolutely.
So people do stay with diagnosed narcissists and end up having, again, I'm using these sort of subjective qualifiers, but end up being happy-ish or no. I mean, I'm thinking of people who have children or people in a parent-child relationship where presumably that child, and you know all about this, I'm sure, as a psychologist, that desire, that striving we always have as children to make our parents happy. Like,
I know.
That it's heartbreaking. It is. And you can walk away
That's
from
my
marriage.
hardest. Those are my hardest coaching cases, patients, whatever you call. That is my hardest because, as parents, we unconditionally love our children. Unconditionally, right? When you have a narcissistic parent, it is really difficult. And the goal of those relationships is that hope that you were talking about, that hope that this time will be different with my parent. This time they'll understand her. I'm going to get them to understand her, or the love won't be conditional anymore. And what happens is the more boundaries you set as the non-narcissist in a narcissistic relationship, the more pushback you're going to get from the narcissist, the more angry you're going to make the narcissist, the more punished you're going to be. I mean, so it's not like you set boundaries and the narcissist is like, you know what? I get it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, because they no longer can get what they need from you.
Is there something that a person can do or look for to spot anything that assures them to the greatest extent that they can be that the person in their life is a narcissist? Because what I'm imagining now is a relationship dynamic where a person is in a situation where he or she feels they are on the other end of narcissistic abuse, but they're not sure. And they want that 100% sort of guarantee that that's what they're dealing with so that they can begin to either seek therapy or set the boundaries or terminate the relationship. But it has to be a sure thing though, Dr. Z, because that's a big thing to give up, right? A relationship with a parent or a marriage or a commitment.
Very hard.
What can they look for?
So I don't think it has to be an all or nothing thing. I think there's times in romantic relationships where you do want to go no contact and cut them, but when there's kids involved, it's very difficult. When as a parent, it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do first is, there's a lot of people, let's say, who have very maladaptive behavior patterns that on the surface look very similar to narcissistic abuse, right? Mm-hmm. But when brought to their attention, when brought to their awareness, they are so locked into these patterns. And at the same time, they don't want to be this way. They don't want to hurt the people that they love. And so when you have that situation, then you have some wiggle room to work with because they have this willingness to want to change. It may be difficult, but it's not narcissistic personality disorder, but superficially it looks the same. Mm-hmm. And the difference is the willingness to want to change behaviors, the willingness to do the work, the willingness to be vulnerable, identify your patterns and change the things that aren't working, because in the end, you want healthy relationships. You don't want to hurt the people that you love. With a narcissist, you're not going to get that. You're just not going to get that. So that's kind of the the kind of key difference between the two that I find is that willingness and that acknowledgement of, yeah, that was wrong. I need to change this.
Are there, to get granular, are there specific questions or things a person can ask the person in their life that they suspect of NPD? Or I don't want to like get, too, what's the word I'm looking for? Like spy guy around. I'm like, ooh, pick up the clues. So like, what can we, if we want to be direct, if we're at a point in our lives and relationships where we want to figure out who the person is that we're living with or dealing with or having a relationship with, what are some specific questions we can do to figure out if this person really falls under that qualification?
Yeah. I wouldn't ask them questions directly. I would be more observant of their behavior patterns and how they respond in certain situations. So things like, are they making promises that they're not following through on? Are they doing things that are making you feel absolutely just crazy? Right? Like gaslighting you. So things like, I never said that. I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. Did you take your medication? You always do this. You're the one that's the narcissist. Things like that. What do the arguments what form do the arguments take? Do you find that you're constantly second guessing your perception of reality, second guessing your perception of, how you view yourself, how you view the people around you? Do you find that over time you've really gotten isolated? Do you speak to your immediate family anymore? Do you speak to your friends? Or has this person slowly over time really shifted who you are? So, it's this big misconception that narcissists go for weak, mild-mannered, spineless people that they can control. And that is not true. Narcissists routinely go for people who are successful, intelligent, good at what they do, somebody that they can step into the spotlight with, somebody who's well-known in their community, things like that. And the reason for that is because the more secure you are in yourself, the higher a fall it is for a narcissist to knock you down. And that's what they love.
A bigger win. It's a bigger win.
It's a bigger win. If they meet you and you don't have any of those qualities, and they don't get anything from that. They don't get that supply. So as far as the difference between, is this really a narcissist versus not, you have to look at the pattern and the dynamic of the relationship from the very beginning. Were they a certain way in the very beginning? Were they so loving? And it was like, not just you connected, but it was like a whirlwind tidal wave. Date number 2, you're talking about soulmates and marriage. I say, if anyone says that you're their soulmate between like the first date and like the 10th date, even into 6 months, run. They don't know your middle name. They don't know your favorite color. On what, I'm sure you're lovely, but on what basis are they forming this idea that you're their soulmate? They literally know nothing about you. If you find yourself being super vulnerable early on, talking about how you grew up with an alcoholic father or your mother left you and all of these really personal stories, or you have an eating disorder and you haven't told anyone and it's date number 2, there's a reason why you're doing that. It's not because you're super comfortable. It's because they're making you feel that you can be super vulnerable and they're storing this information for later use against you. And then you're with this person for a while, the love bombing, these future faking, these promises. And then it starts to shift once they have you. And it kind of is a little subtle in the beginning, and that's why people say, well, why didn't you leave? Well, here's why. Because it's like a leaky faucet. So it's this drip, drip, drip. And before you know it, you're standing in your kitchen and your entire house is underwater. And you're wondering, how the hell did I even get here? So it's a very distinct pattern. And narcissist has a very distinct playbook. And what happens is when you figure out that playbook of a narcissist, you can't unsee it. That's the one good thing about this. Once you see that behavior pattern, you can't unsee it. And once the narcissist realizes they no longer have access to you, to your emotions, to your thinking, to be able to control you, you'll start to see them switch. Anger, silent treatments, smear campaigns. It's a very distinct pattern. And so that's how you really know you're dealing with a narcissist, because it follows a very, very clear-cut pattern across really anybody.
Right. And how much do you tell your patients, who presumably are the ones entangled with the person with NPD, how much to rely on instinct as a tool. We talk a
Yeah.
lot about how the gut feeling is often right. And as women, our intuition tends to be really on track. The problem I've experienced in life, though, is that that sixth sense, so to speak, can often tangle in with anxiety, right? So
Yes.
when you're working with people and trying to help them figure out, okay, do I love a narcissist? How often should they be following that gut instinct that they may have? And how do they discern that from just maybe general anxiety about the relationship?
I love that question. Okay, so here's my whole take on that. I know I'm more alone in this than most, but this just my experience, especially dealing with narcissists, is that you have to be very careful following your gut instinct in relationships. It's not the same as a gut feeling if you're walking down the street and you get this really creepy feeling about somebody that's pet. It's not the same type of thing. Like our anxiety is a natural occurring emotion, right? It gives us information about our world, right? Which is why I tell people we have to have anxiety. I know it may feel crappy at times, but if we're walking across the street and we don't have anxiety, we're not going to look both ways. So we need to have that, right? This kind of gut natural reaction to things. When you're entangled in a narcissistic relationship, not only is your perception of things altered, but your gut instinct is also compromised as well. For like what you were saying, because of anxiety, but you're in this trauma bond, you can't trust your judgment almost. And so what I tell people, especially in narcissistic relationships, it's very difficult to, in retrospect, say I should have trusted my gut, because here's the thing: in the beginning of a relationship, when you're getting love bombed, unless you know what love bombing is, and even still, we're still all susceptible because they're so good at it, right? Like I could be I'm a psychologist. I would know if I'm being love bombed. Yes and no. I mean, yes and no, right? They cater it kind of towards you. So that gut instinct isn't necessarily going to even be there in the beginning because nothing seems wrong. If anything, it seems like a fairy tale. It seems too good to be true. And so a lot of times our gut instincts, we really don't even think about, because why would we if we feel this good? Because who doesn't want to feel that way? So it's
Oh,
really
God.
difficult.
It is. It is. I'm reflecting on it's just one relationship in particular that I had, and it was so phony, so saccharine, so full of like this strange, like you said, like a worship that had like no basis in reality. Like
Yes.
we've known each other for 3 months, and it
Yes.
felt rotten to me from the beginning. And you entertain it for a while, and who knows if it was NPD on the other side. But I would say, as obviously the non-expert here, as a woman having been in that type of position,
Yes.
you do feel it. You feel when it feels fake. I mean, you know how the beginning of an organic relationship or friendship should feel, and you know when you're like,
But a lot of people don't. That's the problem.
and
Yeah.
okay, so listen, maybe
Yeah.
this is a case too, then, Dr. Z, for listening to those close to us in our lives and heeding the opinions of those who are saying, hey, listen, I know this feels great, but maybe like, can you encourage how to coach the people
Yeah.
around those who may be in the position of being love bombed or in the early stages of a relationship with a narcissist? Because we want to save our people, right?
Yes. Yes. 100. And that's why I do this, right? This is why I say these are the red flags of love bombing, because it's like preventative medicine almost. Because
Right.
once you're in it, it's so hard to get out of it. I think, to your point, I think it's the kind of thing where if you grow up in an environment where you've never gotten attention, you've never gotten love, like, God, that's going to feel so good, right?
Mhm.
But if you grow up with healthy relationships and you know what organic, or you've done the hard work over your lifetime, you've been in therapy, you know, right, what organic, healthy relationships look like. You have a good kind of basis to judge it against. But if you don't have that, this is going to look really, really appealing. And so what I tell people in that love bombing stage, if you see your friends, and listen, I've had not just patients, but I've had 100% have had friends in these situations where I'm like, okay, here's what I want you to do. Here's how you test the waters in the beginning. Cancel plans last minute. See what their response is. Okay. Do they respect that and give you space? Do they show up at your house with flowers, even though you said you don't feel good? Do you say, I have a friend's birthday party, I can't go out that night, and they call and they say, oh, I'm so sick, would you, and you make you feel guilty for not going out? Do these little things in the beginning. Test the waters, because here's the thing. If they really like you and you cancel plans, fine. All the more reason they can't wait to see you next time. I had a very close friend who got out of a horribly abusive narcissistic marriage, right? She started dating. It was the first person she had ever been with. She married him. She really had no experience dating, okay, as a grown adult.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because when she got out of that relationship, she started dating and she met this guy, and they spoke for the first week every day for hours. And I said, no, that's not normal. It's not normal. It's just not. I know it sounds great, and I know there's probably people listening say, well, isn't that what you want? No, that's a lack of boundaries. And you really will benefit, even if it's real. Let's just say it is real. What's the harm in just implementing a couple boundaries in the beginning? If they're really into you and they respect your space, that's not going to matter.
Mhm.
And so she canceled plans, and he showed up at her house with a ring pop.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Yes.
You lose points just for that, buddy.
Right. And she thought it was cute. And I'm sitting here going, and she's like, well, you're a psychologist. I've got, no, it hasn't. This is a violation of space and your wishes, right? Like, what if you're throwing up in the bathroom and he's at your, even if you're not sick, it's still a disrespect of your boundaries. So test the waters.
Right. And it's a turning around, like you said, it's a reversing of the needs, right? Like you expressed a need to be alone, and my need is greater to see you. So I'm going to show up with this corny little gag, right? Exactly. Oh, that's interesting. I love that. So that's the test. If you're in the early stages, or your friend is in the early stages of a relationship with someone, use the cancellation trick. Like, I'm all about like tips and tricks to pull from these. So
do they give you the
practical.
silent treatment? Do they hold it against you 3 months saying, well, you broke plans with me at this point, so why can't I cancel plans on you? Look for the quote punishment. And it may be very subtle, but it's about control and manipulation. And so if you are asserting yourself, setting boundaries from the beginning, they're not going to respond well to that, which is why the love bombing occurs, because you just want to be with them all the time. The sex is amazing. Everything's heightened and great and amazing.
Can you quickly, because I want to turn to the parental narcissistic relationship and dig into that. But as we kind of wrap up this part of it, give me the specific list of symptoms, as it were, of love bombing and how it looks.
Yeah. So love bombing in the very beginning of a relationship can take a couple forms, but generally speaking, it's going to be talking a lot in the beginning, like repeated texts over and over again, sending flowers and gifts to your office or to your home, which you think is cute, but really what it is it's like marking their territory. It's making sure that like they, in a way, they own you, and because you're a prop. And with narcissists, they own you. You're their property. You're an object. You're not a person with separate needs and emotions and thoughts and opinions. Listen to how they speak to waiters and waitresses. Listen to how they speak about their exes. Are all of their exes crazy? Are they always the victim? If they do not have custody of their children,
that's a sign.
That is a red flag. Yes.
Yeah.
If they are just talking very badly about their children's parents.
Can I interject with a question? Yeah. Are they also the type of person who it's always someone else's fault?
Always.
There's no accountability.
None. Unless it benefits them, then they'll fake it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. You finish, and then I want to shift over to the parental narcissistic relationship.
Things like you are going on vacations with them, lavish gifts. Things like talks of moving in very quickly, talks about your names of your kids on your second date, promising this is the house we're going to live in. This is what I want to do when we're older and living together. And it's so crazy. Your dreams are the same as my dreams. What's the coincidence? I feel like we have the secret language, those kinds of statements.
Can I interject with a quick question here too, which is, do the narcissists believe that? Do they believe in the world that they're creating? Are they also buying into their own supply here of promises?
So yes and no. So in the beginning, when they're love bombing, they do truly idealize the person that they're with. They have this person in such an idealized view that they they do truly believe that they have like found this amazing person, which is they suck you in, but it's also a control element. They're also trying to make it so that it's really difficult for you to leave. So from that standpoint, they know exactly what they're doing.
It's nefarious.
As soon as you breathe wrong, you're no longer this idealized version. You are now lower than low.
What need does this stem from in the narcissist? I mean, not to get too like in depth on
Yeah.
this side of it, because I'm more concerned with sort of helping people who are in their orbit, but like what types of trauma could have activated this issue with people?
Yeah.
Abandonment?
So there's a lot of different theories on this. Some people will say that it's like there's brain differences. Some will say that it's genetics, but what I find most often in the work that I personally do, it usually stems from not necessarily a trauma, but it stems from anything from golden child syndrome. So like you could do no wrong. There were no consequences. So Scott Peterson I always give this example because it was such a horrific case. But if you watched Scott Peterson's trial and you watched the way his mother reacted to what he did, like his wife and baby are dead. And the mother was like, as if he could do no wrong. And it was like, oh my God, that's so sick, right? So it's this no consequences for their actions, golden child. But with that comes the belittling of other siblings, comes the really high expectations they have of you to always perform and be the best. Nothing you ever do is good enough, right? Or it could be that they're constantly belittling you, constantly making you feel like crap. The love that they give you is conditional. And so a narcissist will put on this kind of heavy facade of, I'm not going to let you knock me down. I'm going to knock you down first, and kind of move through life with that perspective. And then other things, it could be traumatic. There could be anything from inconsistent parenting, neglectful parenting, abusive parenting, but it rarely does it come from a situation where the parenting is a healthy, stable environment.
A person asked this, and I'm curious too, is narcissism a spectrum disorder, right? Can you have a touch of it, or is it a full blown, if you have a little bit, you are a person with NPD?
So we all have narcissistic traits. Like right now, you and I, you're doing what you're an expert in, I'm doing what so like our narcissistic traits are like being plucked right now, so to speak, right? They're a little bit higher. But if I was to go to a doctor's appointment with my daughter at the orthodontist, I don't have a clue what's happening. I'm going to take a step back, right? I'm going to take in the information. I am not in charge. I am not control. And I know how to shift it, right? You know how to shift that stuff in dynamics with people. Somebody who has, let's say, more narcissistic features, let's say, than somebody else may come off more abrupt or more forceful or more abrasive. But to have narcissistic personality disorder, it's not necessarily more traits. It's more about literally the way they see their entire world. It's this construct. It's not just features, and I see this all the time on social media where people saying everybody has narcissism, and that's true, but that's very different than narcissistic personality disorder. So it's not so much how many narcissistic traits you have, it's your awareness, your willingness to know when to move and be fluid. Somebody with a personality disorder is just one like kind of locked in way in terms of how they approach the world.
And I kind of want to reiterate this too. You said it's not fixable. It's not a, hey, let's therapize this out of you.
I hate saying it's not fixable, because you'll listen. There's accounts on Instagram that I see where it's these like, people with narcissistic personality disorder who have gotten help and they're fine. But if you listen to what they're doing, like there's a couple accounts that I follow where it's people with narcissistic personality disorder. They've been diagnosed, whether self or through others, whatever. But they talk about narcissistic behavior from the narcissist viewpoint and tell you why they do what they do. And in a way, it's kind of, they use that platform to get a different type of supply. So I hate saying nothing's fixable, because I always get yelled at for this, but I have to be honest with you. The way that you're going to have a relationship with somebody is not by trying to fix the narcissist. I can tell you that much.
How often or how long do patients come to you who are involved with a narcissist requiring therapy? Say this is someone who will inevitably remain in their orbit, whether because it's a parent of their child or a parent or a sibling. Is this something that the person involved is in lifetime therapy for often?
It really depends on the case. I get people at all different stages of where they're at. I have people saying, I can't tell if this person's a narcissist, or I
Hmm.
know this person's a narcissist. Help me deal with it. Then there's people who help me get out of it, or if they can't get out of it, but how do I set boundaries so that I can live most peacefully? So
Mhm.
it just depends on where they're at in the
Right.
process of this.
Okay. Let's switch back to the parental
But I will say
narcissist
this. I will
relationship.
say this though.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There is a definitive period when you're working with people who are in their orbit where they finally see the blueprint.
Mm.
And there is this epiphany. There is this moment that happens where at that point going forward, it's still going to be hard to change their behaviors in response to narcissists, but they will never unsee the behavior. And when that happens, the amount of empowerment that that person feels is a game changer.
Well, and that seems to me like it would be the point where that person, if it were a marriage or a legal commitment, would decide, okay, this is here to stay. I got to get.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What about those of us who are involved, who have a parent that might be a narcissist or have narcissistic personality disorder? I got
Yeah.
several questions from women in particular who talked about how what they suspect is a narcissistic parent or mother impacted their growth and development. Let's talk about it from the kid side, from that perspective. When your parent is a narcissist, how does it impact the child?
Significantly. And again, I'll tell you this as a parent, it's one of the most emotionally just upsetting cases that I deal with, because from both sides, from a parent and from a child, right? Like it's really upsetting, because it goes against the grain, it goes against nature. um, it's extremely damaging. It's extremely disruptive to their growth. They Again, I hate giving blanket statements, but it's very rare that it's not going to affect them later in life. Um, can they work through it and have productive, healthy, meaningful relationships? 100%. I've seen it. That's what they come to me for. Yes. Will it always be something where a part of them is devastated and they have this hope that eventually their parents going to get it? Of course they do, because what child wouldn't, right? But it's very upset. It's really upsetting. That to me is the most upsetting, I think, because it really interferes with their relationships, their self confidence,
Mhm.
their perception of how they should be treated and what they deserve.
How does healing look for that child who presumably goes on to perhaps be a parent themselves or be in a relationship themselves?
Mhm.
How does healing look for them, and what would you encourage someone who was the child of a narcissist to do to make sure not only that they heal, but they're not drawing into their lives in future relationships that
Yeah.
same type of narcissist that they were trying to get away from?
First, I tell them none of it's their fault. Period. None of it is their fault. And that same goes for romantic relationships. None of it is their fault. They were fed a narrative from a very early age about who they are supposed to think they are, what they are supposed to think they're capable of. The narrative that they've been given, that they've been sold, is not accurate. And
Mm,
so, just like in romantic relationships, when they come out on the other side of these relationships, they realize they don't know who they are. They don't even know what their favorite color is. They don't know what music they like, because they've been told their whole life, this is who you are because this is who I need you to be because it benefits me. They have a ton of guilt and shame because, anytime a child of a narcissistic parent moves towards autonomy in any capacity, whether it's going to college, whether it's having a girlfriend or a boyfriend, getting engaged, getting married, having children, and all of those things are steps towards autonomy. The narcissistic parent is going to view that as abandonment, as disrespect, as, like, how could you do this? I sacrificed my life for you, and this is how you repay me. Um, because they're an extension of the parent. A narcissistic parent views their child as an extension of them. They are not a separate being. They are an object. They
mhm.
are an accessory in a sense. So love is very conditional. If you don't do things the way I want you to do them, if you don't respond to me or love me the way I see fit, I'm going to punish you in a sense, whether that's give you the silent treatment for no reason at all and have you guessing and walking on eggshells with me constantly. You could come home with an A one day and you get reamed out because you should have had an A plus, right? So you never, and that's on purpose. This
Right.
intermittent reinforcement, we call it, which is why it's like an addiction. This model is constantly keeps you guessing,
Mhm.
thinking that you in some way are responsible for your parents' mood.
Ugh.
But
What
you're
a
not.
burden to put on a child. What a burden.
Oh, it's horrible. But here's the thing. It not only are you not responsible, but it's deliberate to make you think you're responsible when really you have zero control over that, obviously.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it causes a lot of damage. It really does. And it's actually really very sad. And so as far as healing goes, the biggest thing is letting go of that guilt that you are doing something wrong by living your own life, that you are
Right.
somehow leaving your parent, right?
Right.
And this happens a lot when people have their own children and they realize how dysfunctional the relationship with their parent was.
Yeah, I wonder how many people come to you as patients and say, "Oh, it finally makes sense now."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yep. And they may not know what it was, but they come because they realize that the patterns are it's so different. Like their natural reaction as a parent is so different than what a narcissistic parent would do,
Mm.
let's say, because it's so unnatural.
It's funny because they finally have something to contrast it against their
Well,
own
because
experience as a parent.
yeah, and think about it. When you become a parent, a non-narcissistic parent, when you become a parent, you now have a higher purpose.
Mhm.
You come first because I always tell people, even if you're a parent, like you have to put you first so you can be a better parent, right?
Right.
Not in a selfish way, but you have to. Like if I don't sleep, I'm a crappy parent the next day, plain and simple, right? Like done. I have to put certain things first. But
Mhm.
with a healthy parent, you now have a higher purpose.
Mhm.
With a narcissistic parent, that child takes away from you.
I mean, I'm thinking of
It's
like these.
competition.
It's competition. And I asked you this question in regards to romantic relationships before, but I'll repeat it in a way in this regard to understanding that you'll probably give the same answer. How can it get much better? Understanding that our parents too, they go out of our orbit a little farther, right? We
Yeah.
begin to have our own lives, whether it's a family or not. We kind of create our own independent existence. Is it a little easier to manage as an adult a relationship with a narcissistic parent because you naturally sort of move away from them anyway? And can you give the person out there who's listening who says, "Okay, this makes sense. I think this is my mom or my dad," hope that they can have a seemingly normal air quote relationship with them at some point?
I think it's easier to separate yourself from a narcissistic parent as an adult, definitely
Mhm.
versus a child, right? And I also
Right.
think it's easier because when you're married or there may be kids involved or there may be, assets in it. It's tricky, right? So with a parent though, I think what ends up happening is you speaking of parent, hi.
You have a visitor?
I forgot my kids at half day. They just walked in. So anyway, I think what ends up happening is as far as the goal being to have a healthy relationship with the narcissistic parent, that can't be the goal.
Oh, gosh,
The
that's
goal,
heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking,
it's hard. It's horrible. It's
but we need
absolutely
the truth.
horrible. It's
Yeah.
it's horrible. And the reason for that is in order to have a healthy relationship with a narcissistic parent, that would involve the narcissistic parent changing.
Mhm. Mhm.
You have to have a healthy relationship with yourself
Mhm.
to be able then to set boundaries, to set limits, to be aware and mindful and be able to predict the narcissistic parent's next step, to be able to separate from them so that you can have a relationship with yourself that's healthier. The goal can't
Mhm.
be to have a healthier relationship because remember, the healthier you are, the closer you are to setting boundaries and becoming more autonomous, the angrier and the more rageful and the more manipulative the narcissist is going to get until they can't get anything from you anymore. Then they may leave you alone because they're not getting supply, but they'll never stay away for good. They always holidays. That's why holidays, birthdays, anniversaries are such like triggering days because, or like if they know you're graduating from somewhere, like maybe you went back to school, or you're getting married again. that's when they go in again,
Right.
just to see if they still have access to you on your day.
Gosh, so it is all about those boundaries. And like you said, in the romantic relationships, the boundaries we create, the way we value ourselves, our time, our emotions, these foundational things, it sounds like, are more, I mean, they're always essential to a person's mental health and well-being, but probably even more so when they're in the orbit of a narcissist, because if you're not protecting that energy, it's like the people around you who are supposed to also have your best interest at heart definitely
Correct.
don't. So
Correct.
this support is foundational, it seems
And
like.
you have to remember too, also, whether it's a parent or whether it's a romantic relationship, the people outside of your tight dynamic,
Right.
chances are they have no idea this is going on. You're kind of in this isolation mode because
Right.
outside, especially with a covert narcissist, they are charming and lovely, philanthropic, part of the community. Everybody loves them. They're like the life of the party, so friendly, giving. That when people hear these things and that you leave or you're not talking to your parent anymore, and the outside goes, I can't, but it's your mom, right? But it's your dad. And that's why those statements are so dangerous and so hurtful, even though they're not necessarily said with malicious intent.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be perceived that way to others. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I feel like I've used that line before, but it's the
We
end of the
all
day,
listen.
it's your parent, right?
We all have, right? But
Right.
there's a reason why they do that, and there's a reason people say, "Well, they don't know they're doing." Really, they do because they'll save it. People think narcissists can't control their anger, right? They can't help themselves. But think about it. They could go to a parent. I've had this happen with. They went to like a parent gathering for like their kids' school. They were
Mm.
lovely. Soon as that door shut, all hell broke loose. So, or as soon as they get off the phone, then all hell. So they know exactly when to turn it on. They're actually extremely controlled in terms of
Mm.
their anger and their emotions. Because
All
if
hell
you
breaks
look at
loose, meaning like they start to criticize or to attack or to like that. That's what it.
as soon as you're behind closed doors.
Yeah. Wow.
So, they know how to turn it on and off. They know.
I want to wrap things up here, Dr. Z, with a note of hope for
Yes.
people. Like I said, the response to this is and was tremendous, and I want to make sure that we're showing up in service to people who this may be their reality. I know you touched on a couple of times seeking out therapy for the person who's in the orbit of the narcissist, right?
Yeah.
Sort of supporting your own mental health and well-being. What other words of hope can you leave us with, or advice can you give us?
Yeah. One, it's not your fault. It is not your fault. It's in romantic relationships, you were tricked. You were tricked. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how successful you are. Try not to beat yourself up for saying, I can't believe I did that. Every single one of us, myself included, doing this for a living, we're all susceptible to this. It's not your fault. There is help. There is absolutely another side to this. I promise you. Will it be easy? No, but can you heal? 100%. It's important to find somebody who understands the subtleties and the nuances of these types of behaviors. I cannot stress this enough. Survivor stories are so important, so important. At the same time, I tell people, try not to get so wrapped up in trying to figure out whether or not you're dealing with a narcissist. If you have been in a relationship for 5 years, 10 years, and you are still miserable, no matter what you have tried to do, you're still allowed to leave, right? You're still allowed to leave if it doesn't work, even if you have no idea, right? If this is what you're dealing. If you've tried everything and it's just not working, you still are allowed to leave. If you're being abused, you are allowed to leave. There doesn't have to be a label. So I think sometimes people get very caught up in they can't leave unless they know it's X, Y, or Z. I can't leave unless I know for a fact they're cheating. Well, if your relationship is horrible for you anyway, does it matter if they, you know what I'm saying? So it goes kind of, I think, just in general. And there's help and there's hope. And I can tell you that I have seen it firsthand constantly, people learning how to live productive, happy lives outside of this relationship with a narcissist when they figure out kind of how to manage it. Not with the narcissist, but separate from the narcissist. There are so many other healthy relationships to be had.
More good people than narcissists.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Dr. Z, you have been such a wealth of information and perspective and advice. Thank you for spending time with me today. And I know people will probably want to connect. So, a few ways we can do so that you'll get your eyes on.
Sure. Yeah. I'm on Instagram, Dr. Z Psychologist, my website, drjamiezuckerman.com. Um, I post a ton of stuff about narcissism on there. So feel free to check that out.
Are you taking patients right now?
I am taking coaching clients. Yes. So
Coaching clients. Okay.
for kind of help give you a blueprint, kind of master plan on how to manage this and deal with it, and kind of educate people on how to navigate this extremely complex dynamic. So you can schedule an appointment at drjamiezuckerman.com, and yeah, we'll be happy to do that.
Huge, huge thank you, Dr. Z, for spending time with me today.
Thank you.
And guys, thank you. If you were watching live, I know we had an amazing live audience listening and watching today's episode. Thank you if you submitted questions ahead of time as well. We'll include all of Dr. Z's links in show notes. Go back, check out the other episodes of We Gotta Talk, rate and review. That makes a huge difference in getting these shows out to people who might find them useful or helpful in some way. And thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you next week with more good stuff here on